You're live, sir.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to welcome everybody to the Township of Georgian Bay Planning Council of Monday, March 8th. Call this meeting to order at 9:02 a.m. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are on the lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. They continue to care for this land. They continue to shape the Township of Georgian Bay. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today in guiding our decisions and our actions. Megwich. So, putting everybody to, well, actually, I should ask, sorry, I apologize, whether anybody has any declarations of pecuniary interest in regards to the Planning Council agenda in front of us. I have not seen any response, so I'm going to presume we don't. And I have moved by Councillor Bochek, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Be it resolved that Council adopts the consent, that's not the consent agenda, the planning agenda of March 9th, 2021 as circulated. All those in favor? And I'm getting more than enough hands to say that is carried.
We've lost Councillor Wienko and Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, we seem to. Let's hang tight before I do my little speech making, because that's the next task I have in front of me. And Ms. Way, will we have anybody joining us for this portion of the meeting?
Yes, we will.
I'm wondering, do you want to get them connected before I do my boring routine speech?
Two of them are in as attendees, so they can hear everything. And then when it's their time to speak, I will move them.
Sounds good. All right. This morning, there is a public meeting scheduled for one proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the clerk will advise council as to when, how, and to whom notice of the public meeting was circulated for the proposed amendment being considered. The clerk will also advise the appeal procedures. Next, staff will advise the purpose and effect of the bylaws and provide any other information that is relevant to the applications, and the clerk will summarize any correspondence on file. From there, the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the amendments being considered. Please be respectful of time and be concise with your comments. All commentators are requested to state their name, address, and sign in on the sheet provided. I'm not sure we can do that right now, but anyway, as long as the clerk has acknowledged you, all is good. After the public discussion, the public meeting will be closed. Council will then have an opportunity to provide comments for clarification. I now declare this meeting to be a public meeting pursuant to Section 34 of the Planning Act to deal with the following proposed amendment. Said 21-03-33366 Georgian Bay Shore for the Proctors. To the clerk.
Notice of the public meeting was sent by first class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 to 800 meters of the property subject to the proposed applications, and to those persons and agencies likely to have had interest in the applications. These notices were sent at least 30 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed applications and a key map showing the location of the properties or a description of the lands to be affected by the proposed amendments. Other relevant information may also have been provided. These circulations were all provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and the Township of Georgian Bay official plan. Members of the public are advised at this point that unless they make an oral or written submission to council before council makes a decision on these applications, that any subsequent appeal to the local planning appeals tribunal may be dismissed by the tribunal. Anyone who wishes to be notified of council's decision respecting the proposed zoning bylaw amendments must submit a written request to the planning department.
Okay, thank you very much. To our planner, Mr. Oster, I see your face. I presume you're making this presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, Council. Just going to bring up the presentation here.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
We see the presenter slides.
Oh, how's that?
Perfect. Thanks, Brad.
All right, so good morning, Council. Today we have a public meeting scheduled for zoning bylaw amendment Z2103 for lands located at 33366 Georgian Bay Shore within the Go Home Bay waterfront community. This is a key map of the subject lands outlined in red here. It is located approximately 1 kilometer east of Star and West Wind Islands, again within the Go Home Bay waterfront community. The 2018 aerial imagery showing the outline of the property again in red. As you can see, the property is fairly well treed with dense forest cover, most of which would be retained following construction of the proposed dock. So an overview of the policy framework that applies to the application. The lands are designated as rural lands within the context of the provincial policy statement. They are designated waterfront within the district's official plan. Within the township official plan, they are again located within the Go Home Bay waterfront community and are considered to be a rural or residential area. And within the zoning bylaw, the property is zoned Go Home Bay Residential SR3, with the entire shoreline being zoned fish habitat type 1. So the purpose and the effect of the application is to install a floating dock that would provide access to the subject lands. The current FH1 zone that is applied to the entire shoreline does not permit the installation of the dock. The application proposes a site-specific FH1 zone to permit a floating dock in accordance with section 4.1.13 of the zoning bylaw. This section of the zoning bylaw is what regulates dock length, width, and projection. So they're not requesting any relief to this section other than just to permit the dock within the FH1 zone. So the applicants did also submit a fish habitat impact assessment with their application. So staff have provided that to our environmental consultant, and they're currently undertaking a peer review of that document. So here we have a survey of the subject property, the overview here of the entire lands, as well as a close-up of the proposed built-up areas. So here's the location of the proposed dock, as well as the proposed dwelling and associated septic system. The applicant is also proposing some small land-based accessory structures like a storage shed and a sleeping cabin. All of the on-land development does comply with the requirements of the zoning bylaw. And the only relief sought to the zoning bylaw through this application is just to permit the dock within that fish habitat zone. So these are the construction plans for the proposed dock. It is an 8x30 plastic floating dock that is proposed to be installed for access. And just an overview of the application process. So the applicant did complete a pre-consultation with staff in November of 2020. Staff advised of the policies that are applicable in this case and any submission requirements, which did include the fish habitat impact assessment. The applicant then submitted a complete Planning Act application, and we're now here at this stage with the public meeting. The next steps would include staff considering all of the comments that are received, as well as awaiting the peer review of the fish habitat assessment by our consultant. And then a detailed policy analysis report with recommendation would come before council for decision. And that's all I have for my presentation. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much. I think before we get to that, I'm first going to ask the clerk if we've received any correspondence on this application.
Mhm. 3 letters of support were received from Derek Wishart, Doug Grundy, and Mark Smith. The Madawaska Club of Go Home Bay also submitted a letter of no objection, and correspondence from the District of Muskoka stating no objection so long as appropriate development control techniques are used to implement the recommendations of the Fish Habitat Impact Assessment and any recommendations of the associated peer review as required.
All right, thanks very much. Are there any members of the public that you're, not yet, Councillor Cooper, we'll get there. Any members of the public who wish to speak to this? Are you? I know you mentioned there were a couple of people in the waiting room.
So there's Carolyn and Nick Proctor. The owners are available, or perhaps now that I can see, just Carolyn is available. And Peter Folds is also on the line and has his hand raised.
Hey, Ms. Proctor, do you wish to add anything to the presentation made by our planning department?
I don't have much to add other than just our general excitement to move forward with the project and appreciation of the work of the planning department thus far. So very excited to be able to move forward with building and hoping for the granted adjustment.
Thank you. And at one point I saw Mr. Folds, but I don't think I see that anymore.
His video isn't on.
Well, Mr. Folds, would you care to add anything?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'm here in my capacity as chair of the Planning Review Committee for the Madawaska Club of Go Home Bay. And we have submitted written comments, and as Ms. Way indicated, we're not opposed to the application, but I wanted to add a couple of things. First of all, it may be self-evident, but this is a water access only property. So the only means of accessing the property is by boat, which makes a dock somewhat necessary. In coming to our decision not to oppose this application, we have relied in part on the fish habitat assessment that's been filed, but also we think it's significant that in this particular instance, we're looking at a single floating dock on a frontage that is over 200 meters in length. And I think that's a significant factor when taking into consideration any potential impact on fish habitat. And that's all I have, unless there are any questions.
I don't think so at this point, but if anyone surface, I'm sure we'll get back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to council. Before I do, Ms. Way, I don't know if it's just me, but in the report that I received through our agenda, I did not see a copy of the fish habitat study. Mr. Oster.
I could speak to that. So we didn't include a copy of the fish habitat impact assessment with the agenda, as our consultant is currently undertaking a peer review of that document. So we were waiting until we get comments back from the peer reviewer to include those. So we would include the fish habitat assessment that was submitted with the application, as well as our consultant's comments and their peer review in a subsequent report to council.
Okay, it makes it a little more difficult for council to ask any questions regards to that particular review, but we will, I'm sure we may do so when we receive a copy of the fish habitat review. Councillors, I did see your hand, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Kutzier. And I just want to start with, I'm not necessarily concerned about approval for this in the future, other than there's some process issues, one of which the mayor just raised. I think we're saying this is sort of where we're getting public input, but it looked like from the process, it's the only time we get public input, and without the fish habitat study and the remaining sort of peer review, et cetera, I'm concerned about that particular aspect of the process. So I just wanted to register that with our staff. There are a couple of other questions. Brad, the aerial photograph you showed was from 2018. As we know in Georgian Bay, we have huge fluctuations in water level. There's also aerial photographs available through the District of Muskoka for 2013. Have you looked at that?
So through the mayor to Councillor Cooper, we did review the aerial photography from both dates. And the survey that the applicant did provide with the application also showed the 177.4 contour.
Right. So I just wanted to point out, if you do look at the aerial photography 2013, the shoreline has quite a different sort of look to it. Looks like not only do we have sort of Canadian Shield at 2018 to the waterfront, but in 2013 there looks to be quite a bit of what I would call sort of a fish habitat mudflat in front of the entire piece of property. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm glad you've looked at it, but it is an aspect that one would wonder, A, fish habitat, and B, a dock attachment could be an issue in terms of how long would the ramp have to be in low water years to get over this mud flat, as it were. That's what it appears to be. I also wanted to ask, in your report, you talked about having a consultation with the proctors on the November 20th, and then on November 30th, a fish habitat assessment came in. When was the fish habitat assessment completed?
So the date on the fish habitat assessment was from November of 2020, but I believe that the applicants were aware of that requirement prior to our pre-consultation. So I'm not sure if Ms. Proctor wants to speak to that. Perhaps they had retained the consultant prior to our consultation, but I'll let Ms. Proctor speak.
Yes, we retained the consultant earlier, and they had done a site visit during the summer, I think, to do the report. It's just that they hadn't written it up until November.
So I'd be interested in the date, because we do know that fish habitat is active from a spawning perspective in the spring, April, May, June kind of thing. And I think that's a consideration of that. So I'm just pointing that out. But I have a few other points that I'd like to discuss today, and I'm happy to also send some of this in an email to you. But effectively, it's related to, once again, sort of the process. And a part of the process here also is that the township is looking at this whole subject. And in fact, it was it has been in front of our planning committee. They weighed in on some initial issues related to this, but we still haven't sort of nailed this down. So I think I'm sorry to have to suggest that we need to slow this down, but I do believe there's legislation about docks and fish habitat, and the township needs to examine this particular matter. So I wanted to put that forth. I mean, there's a number of other concerns. Has the province relaxed its rules around fish habitat? I'm not aware of that. So I wanted to raise that as well. I think floating docks generally in a fish habitat can be okay, but it's boat traffic in other words, vessels at the docks, and a lot of back and forth that will disturb fish habitat. So it's worthy of noting. So that is that. I would also like to say that in terms of the peer review, I'd like to see that in front of the public. And I would also like to remind you, as I understand it, our bylaws haven't actually changed. So basically, every time we see a property like this, we're going to be having a request where we have to change our bylaw or create a new one. So in other words, our bylaw becomes a non-bylaw because we have so many of exceptions. So that's a concern to me. So in other words, I think we have some homework to do. I'm a little concerned about this as well, because some people that will be at properties that are less desirable from the perspective of fish habitat, or desirable for fish, but not for development, it could be coming forth and pointing to this as an example where if they get approval for this, they may, in fact, we may be setting a precedent for other properties. So I'm sympathetic to the fact that this is a property that has been created in SR zone, but it has also been identified as having fish habitat. And I think we have a lot of information that needs to come forth. And I'm happy to, because I have such a long list here, I'd be happy to provide that information to you, Brad, so that that can be part of your consideration. But the key one I'd like to leave with you is that we still have policies in place. Our planning committee hasn't dealt with it. And I'm concerned about the public having the opportunity to see the entire, to see the full story. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Bochek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of always been under the opinion that a floating dock really has no detriment to a fish habitat. A lot of times, or in most times, it'll enhance the fish habitat, giving shelter from the sun and places for fish to spawn. So I don't really have an issue with this application. It is the only access to the property. I mean, short of helicopter dropping the folks in every weekend, they're going to need a dock. And the size of this dock is no bigger than a boat. I mean, if a boat pulled up to that shoreline, it would be about the same size as this dock, and it could sit there moored, or use a mooring buoy and just moor it offshore. So I think a floating dock is perfect for this application. I've reviewed the application, and I see no reason why we should not allow permission for this dock to be put in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jarvis.
Just in light of Councillor Bochek's comments, I want to echo Councillor Cooper's comments. Until we have a better idea of where the water is at the low water level, I think it's imperative on us to sit tight and see what all the information is as it comes in, because as we found with other applications, when you put a dock into an area where there's low water, the dock itself probably is not an impairment to fish habitat. It may be a bonus, but boat traffic, well, we've been advised, is significantly disruptive to fish activity. So I think it's really important that we try and get a better handle on what that shoreline looks like in a low water situation. We all know that we're looking at water levels that fluctuate over 2 meters. And we've got to make sure we consider that. And plus the fact, again, as Councillor Cooper said, we're still sitting on a revision to a bylaw that hasn't been done yet regarding docks and fish habitat. I think we got to sit tight until we get that sorted out. As much as I see a big piece of property with a very, very respectable development on it, and the concept of the dock seems on, just on the surface to be inconsequential. The fact that that shoreline could be significantly impacted by low water is something we've really got to consider. So I'm with Councillor Cooper on this at this time. We need more information. Thank you.
Ms. Oster.
So I'd just like to let council know that we can take all of these comments and provide them to our environmental consultant, who can, specifically address those comments. So if you could forward me an email just with your points, I'll make sure that we pass those along to the consultant to address.
Yes, because of course, this being the public meeting is an opportunity for both the public and council to ask for more information, which is clearly what we're doing. Any other councilor? Councilor Hazelton.
Thank you, Mayor. So when I first looked at this and I saw the size of the property and the amount of shoreline, I thought, wow, this is great. Saw the aerial pictures and thought, wow, this is great. And then I saw that it had the F1 fish habitat across the entire property. In fact, not only across this property, across the neighbor's property. And I thought, oh, how can you have that big a distance when there doesn't appear to be any wetland-ish type shoreline? How is it possible that the fish habitat actually spans that whole distance? So I kind of went from, this should be an easy thing to support to, oh, well, what about this fish habitat? And then something clicked in my head. It concerns me when we collectively figure out how to break a policy and go in a new direction that could set a precedent for all kinds of other scenarios out on the bay. So right now we have this policy, F1 fish habitat, no dock. What we're saying here is, oh, well, this very simple matter. We'll just change the F1 fish habitat to an F1 XX fish habitat, and therefore we can allow a dock. Well, then that kind of opens the floodgates, in my opinion, to every other property that has an F1 fish habitat to redesignate it as F1-XX, and now we can put docks in there. Now, those are concerns in general. I do have one trivial, perhaps, observation, but I'll just leave this up to the environmental consultant and perhaps the proctors to look at. When you look at the 2013 aerial photos of the property, the proposed dock location is actually in a location where there is an enormous amount of dry land projecting out from shore. Whereas about 100 meters north of there, you have in low water a very small amount of dry land out from shore. So that kind of causes me to think that maybe there's some long, shallow runs out from shore where the proposed dock is, which will make it problematic when the water level goes down. Either way, based on other ideas that have been brought to council in the past, having a very long bridge or walkway might be useful. Anyways, those are just comments I have on the application in general. I would like to ask our planning consultant a couple of questions here, if I may. On page 4 of 25, when you talk about, Brad, the background, you reference a resolution of P-41-2019. And I'm confused why you did that. And let me just keep on going, and then you can come back and tell me why. But resolution P-41-2019 was a planning council resolution. Planning council then delegated that task to planning committee, and in planning committee, a new resolution was provided, PC-04-2020, that was approved on January 2020, and on March of 2020, council adopted through a consent agenda that resolution, and the clarity is, I think, important. The previous resolution basically said that the township is going to study potentially putting docks in any property, and that revised resolution, which I think supersedes the previous one, clarified the focus and spoke only about dealing with legally existing or legally non-complying docks on developed properties. And so I think it's important that we don't think that there are activities underway to consider this kind of property, which is undeveloped and no dock at all. I'm not sure that's really helpful in the overall process, but I would like to ask Brad, if you don't have that other resolution in front of you, would you please report back to us and confirm that that does supersede the previous resolution? Because I think it's important from a clarity standpoint about what we as a township are considering is clear and not wide open like the previous resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I don't think I see any more hands. I think we've assigned some homework on this project, which was, of course, the purpose. I have moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that Development Services Report 2021-20, dated March 8th, 2021, with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment application Z21-03 be received. And that prior to the consideration of the zoning bylaw amendment by council, a peer review be completed of the impact assessment submitted with the application at the applicant's expense and to the satisfaction of the township's environmental consultant. And that staff be directed to consider the comments received for Z21-03 and prepare a recommendation report and bylaw that will be brought back to a subsequent council meeting for consideration. Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Douglas.
I just perhaps would like to suggest an amendment to that resolution, that when it comes back, that we continue on down the road of providing public, allowing the public to provide input, because right at the moment, there's quite a few questions out there and the public hasn't seen the report. I think that's what we should be doing in any event. So I'm suggesting an amendment. I don't know whether anybody wants to craft the words to this, but essentially I'm suggesting that the outstanding information, particularly as it pertains to the reports and the peer reviews, be included and the public be allowed to respond. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. Just a quick question to Brad. I mean, maybe it's too early for me this morning. Why are we doing a peer review without council asking for it? Was it requested prior to us, or is this just a normal course for the planning department?
Through the mayor to Councillor Douglas, because the township has retained an environmental consultant, we're now just going to be forwarding any environmental reports that are submitted with an application directly to the consultant to undertake a peer review, so that their comments would be considered by council prior to a decision being made on an application.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I just needed a little bit of clarification how our process was happening there, and it's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, though, I think given our new approach, I do think, and I'm with Councillor Cooper on this, that it's difficult for the public to comment, and council for that matter, when we haven't seen, in the very least, the initial fish habitat impact assessment, because that might have comments that would, let me call it, strengthen or weaken the case for allowing a dock in the area. And so I feel that we've been, we and the public are incompletely informed, if that doesn't sound too awkward, at this point, and therefore our comments are restricted because of that. Councillor Hazelton.
Just thinking to help with the wordsmithing, if that is useful. I know Karen may be working on it already, but if you just change the last line of the third statement there, be brought back to a future planning council meeting, public planning council meeting for consideration, I think we would get what we've just talked about.
Ms. Way.
I can provide comments on the legislation, but I think Ms. Lemieux was going to perhaps
sorry.
on.
Ms. Lemieux, welcome to the meeting. I'm glad your computer's working.
Oh, fun way to start a Monday. Thank you. I just wanted to echo what Councillor Hazelton was just saying. We can add that wording in if council prefers to say subsequent public meeting. So however Karen is able to fit that in, that's absolutely no problem. We can make sure to recirculate so both the public and council has time to look at that fish habitat review when it comes up.
I personally liked Councillor Hazelton's suggestion because it seemed very efficient. Councillor Bocek.
Well, I think I can agree with both the mayor and Councillor Hazelton that this is an important step to revisit this at a public meeting, to allow members of the public and us to review the fish habitat study. But I would also remind council that our process does allow a public meeting to take place, and then subsequently thereafter, it will come to council for approval. So if we come back to another public meeting, this was only going to extend their ability to do any work by another month at least. So I would suggest that if this does come back to council, that not only is it a public meeting, but a resolution could be formed at that time and a decision could be made by council, so that we have the best of both worlds. We also have an opportunity to go over the peer review, and we're not delaying the customers another 30 days or more to get to the approval stage. So just a recommendation by me.
I think that's a good recommendation. And, you know, we do, as council, even if it's a public meeting, we do have the ability to, as we have sometimes in the past, make a recommendation or approve a bylaw change if we didn't feel we needed more information in order to make that decision.
Yeah,
In this case, we absolutely need more information.
Yeah, I just didn't want this to come back for another public meeting and then be scheduled for a month or two beyond that before they actually get an opportunity to have their application approved. So I appreciate the comments.
Councillor Cooper.
I'm sorry, I thought I was under the impression that that's what we're doing right now. That's the resolution has been basically, we've added a one piece, which is saying that we would like to see the reports along with perhaps a recommendation from staff and deal with it just when it comes back to us. So I think that's what we've got anyway, but I could be wrong. Karen, can you comment on that?
That's absolutely what we do have. But we're now just going to add one more opportunity for the public.
At the very end, to a subsequent public meeting for consideration.
Yeah. Okay. So now the resolution read, do you want me to read the whole resolution again? Okay, the last line, the last paragraph reads, and that staff be directed to consider the comments received for Z2103 and prepare a recommendation report and bylaw that we brought back to a subsequent public meeting for consideration. All those in favor? All right, and this is carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Proctor. And we'll see you in a month's or two's time whenever the reports are ready. And that ends the public portion of our meeting. So what? Okay, so we have one more application here. It's not a public meeting, and that's in regards to the extension of the draft plan of condominium approval for the vacant land at Oak Bay, and that would be to our planning department. Ms. Lemieux, was this one yours?
That is correct. Share my screen here.
I'm glad your computer's working then. Otherwise, the rest of us would have to get by without you.
Go to another computer, but luckily I had a spare. Okay, so the next matter in front of council is a request for extension of draft plan of condominium approval for block 14, which many of you would know under the term of Waterside. So this application was made to the district, as the district is the approval authority on this matter, but of course the township is a commenting agency. So this is in front of you today for a resolution to be voted on to be able to provide the district with township council's comments. So as you can see, obviously location map, we're all very familiar with the area. The waterside development here is outlined in red. So this is just a basic overview of the master plan and the different communities. As many of you know, the area in orange here is considered the clubhouse towns. The green is the woodlands. And then so here would be Waterside, which is essentially the next phase that is being proposed for development. So here is the overview of the entire Oak Bay area. So as you can see, essentially Oak Bay is split between two master draft plans of subdivision, S 2005-7, which is anything north of Golf Course Road, so this area here, and then S 2005-10, which is everything south of Golf Course Road. So council may remember back in 2019, this was the last extension request that did come in front of council regarding Oak Bay. So I just wanted to clarify what that was versus what this application is. So this resolution was in regards to the draft plan of subdivisions for the entire development. So this resolution that was passed, which was to support the extension of 1 year of the draft plans of subdivision, was for the entire area. And this is when obviously the conversations about the secondary access began. And this is why this added comment was put in by council to ensure that district was aware of council's view on that secondary access. But today, the extension in front of you today is only pertaining to the draft plan of condominium within Waterside. So this application essentially is just going to allow for their planning process to continue. This application is not going to permit any construction on the ground work to be done. There is still a number of things that Oak Bay needs to complete. They have submitted a rezoning application for the property. They have to do a site plan amendment application. So there's many things that is still going to cause them to come back in front of council for comment, review, etc. So I just don't want council to be under the assumption that this application in any way is going to permit any shovels in the ground here. It's not. It's purely that this condo application has had its 1 year deadline hit, and they just need that extension. So here we have just a zoomed in version of what is being proposed for Waterside. Again, this was provided to me by the district. I've been in constant communication with district staff on these applications, and they are essentially just waiting for this resolution from council to go through. So again, just to reiterate that this overall Oak Bay extension that was passed in 2019, this will actually be coming back in front of council in a month or two again. So that is when it's staff's understanding that that would be the most appropriate time if there's any additional comments that council would like to make. And I can assure you that staff will also be making comments about the secondary access. That will be the time to do so. This extension is just purely for that condo application within Waterside, so they can continue the process that they need there. So hopefully that clarifies a bit of the previous one to now. They are different applications. They are not the same. But please, any comments or questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Bocheck.
Thank you, Victoria. Do we have anything from the District of Muskoka in the way that they support this or don't? And secondly, the plan of subdivision is a responsibility of the District of Muskoka. Although I love to have everything come across our council desk, I'm wondering why this would not go to district, being that it's an extension of a site plan. Thank you.
So yes, so this is overall, this is a district approval. They have the final say. This resolution that council is to pass today, if you choose to do so, that is essentially just a support to what district will be doing. So district contacted us and requested for a resolution from council in support of the application. They have their draft reports ready to go. They are supporting, I believe, a 2-year extension. Based on that, there's been no other comments because there's so many other things that are coming forward with the entire Oak Bay subdivision soon. This one essentially is just, they just need this extra time to finish, the rezoning application, things like that. So it is, you're correct, it is a district approval. We are essentially just a commenting agency on this. So this is why it's in front of council in this matter and not an actual bylaw.
Any other comments? What's in front of me is moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Rienko. Be it resolved that Development Service Report 2021-21 dated March 8, 2021, with respect to the draft plan of vacant land condominium C2008-6 be received. And that the Township of Georgian Bay endorse an extension of the draft plan of condominium approval for a period not exceeding 2 years. And that the District of Muskoka be advised in writing of the Township's position. All those in favor. Councillor Jarvis?
Sorry to be late on this. Sorry, was the previous application just a 1-year extension, Victoria?
So through your worship to Councillor Jarvis, yes, so district did take the recommendation from Township Council and change that to a 1 year instead of the original 2 years. So that is coming back to you probably in a month or two again for your comment.
But that's for the overall.
That's for the overall. So this one development hasn't come for extension before, has it?
I do not believe so. No, I think the original years now we've hit that original 3 years on the condo app.
And then finally, would it be normal for an extension to be 2 years, or does it vary depending on the development and everything else?
It's typically 2 years because, especially when you get into engineering for service and things like that, it's tough to get a lot done in a year. However, again, the district has been great in listening to this council and listening to this council not wanting to give too much and wanting to be able to see the process or the progress, every year. So it is more typically 2 years, but they have been quite supportive when council wants to see only 1 year.
One final question, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Well, this time.
I see that this is not an unpublic portion of our meeting. Anything coming forward on this application would also not be public as well, I presume. Is there any chance for the public to have any participation in this process, part of the process?
Extensions to draft plan conditions are not public processes. I think the one blessing here is the applicants have made an application for a rezoning application for Waterside. So that is a public process, which is going to be coming forward next month. So that is essentially giving us the opportunity to open up that public process again, which is great because typically you wouldn't have that. So we're pretty lucky that it's aligning with the public meeting to be coming soon.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope I don't have to read the motion again. I'll say all those in favor. And that is carried. Thank you very much.
I'm also in favor of buying Victoria a new microphone and headset so we can hear her better.
Yes, you're coming through a little muffled.
Sorry.
Our training in sign language hasn't quite been completed yet. We don't have our certificates on that. Okay, council, we're going closed. Whereas section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended provides authority for councils of municipalities to close a meeting or parts of a meeting to the public if the subject matter pertains to a matter identified in section 239(2). And whereas the Council of the Township of Georgian Bay deems it necessary to close this portion of the meeting in order to address matters under the following sections of 239(2). A, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting municipalities. And that would be for the LPAD appeal in regards to Kings Farm Road. And B, the LPAD appeal in regards to Brandy's Cove. Now be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Georgian Bay moves into a closed session of council at 9:50 a.m. All those in favor?